registrations. Not everybody could be here at the live performance. So I'm super happy to have all of you here. And obviously the gut-brain connection is a really important topic. People really want to know about it. So let's see what we can do to kind of inform you. So like I mentioned in the chat, so if some of you may not know, but down in the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat icon. And if you click that, you can have your chat open. What I would love for you to do is just put your first name and where you're calling in from. You know, a lot of you are from Bozeman, but many of you are not. So if you would just write that in, and then also like, I want to know why you want to know about the gut-brain connection. What about it is attracting you, or what makes you want to know more about this, and how might it apply to you? And then also, you know, where did you find out about this? I know some of you I've worked with, some of you I'm currently working with, some of you are past clients, some of you are through Warriors and Quiet Waters. So lots of different places that we know each other. So if you would just tell me where you found out about this, that would be super helpful to me. All right. So we're going to cover today how the gut and the brain are connected, and it's a complicated kind of talking that's going back and forth between the gut and the brain. So I've tried to distill the information as simply as I can, not because I think that we all need simple definitions, but because it is so complicated that I wanted to really break it down into what we need, information that we need to feel our best. The other thing we'll talk about is how different gut issues or digestive issues affect gut health and brain health. And then we'll also discuss what to eat for healthy and happy gut bacteria, as well as some other lifestyle things that we can do. So just a little disclaimer. All the information contained and shared in this presentation tonight is for your educational purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions that you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have read or heard or seen here or in any of my shared content. Okay, now that we got that out of the way. Okay, so I just want to say that I'm going to be sharing you, I said, so much information tonight. I could really geek out on this stuff all day long. I mean, if you know me, you know that I'm passionate about gut health and I'm passionate about general health and wellness, because I really do feel like the better that we feel in our bodies, the more that we can show up for others. And that just makes stronger communities and stronger families and stronger selves. So that's why I do what I do. I feel so lucky that I get to see these dramatic shifts in people's lives when we work on their gut health. So I'm always learning from my clients and from these situations too. So it's exciting. I will say that I am living the gut-brain connection today because you know, we have a lot of people, like I said, over 80 that registered, which is super exciting, but it caused me to have some butterflies. I was a little stressed out. And as you'll know, so like it started, I saw clients all this morning, and as I was going through the day and thinking about this presentation and getting excited for it, I started to get a little indigestion. And it was like right here in my esophagus. It was like a little burny. And I don't usually get indigestion, nor do I get heartburn, but it showed up. And I was like, oh, this is exciting. And then as the day progressed, my stomach right below my ribs started to feel a little bit like butterfly-y, which we all can understand. And then sure enough, my gut started feeling like it was a little bit in knots and even got a little bloaty. So that was the gut brain in action for me today, which I think is rather appropriate, honestly. So just remember that today we're talking about this gut brain, and there's so much science and discovery that's really happening every day. The number of studies that are coming online every day is pretty amazing. We're finding out so many new things all the time. And I'm sure that you were going to have questions, and I'm excited to answer them. So just remember to write those questions in the chat. And if I can, I will answer every single one specifically, or I'll bundle them with Alicia's help and even Keisha's help. So I think that's it for that stuff. So let me just tell you a little bit about me just to kind of get started. So obviously I'm Karen Mitchell, and I am both a functional nutrition lifestyle practitioner and a national board certified health and wellness coach. For 5 years now, I've specialized in SIBO, which I'm going to tell you about, IBS, and functional gut problems like bloating, pain, constipation, diarrhea, IBS, and IBD. Most often, my clients also come with anxiety, lack of mental clarity, even some depression, hormone issues, and autoimmune diseases and symptoms and diagnoses. So part of that is some people show up and they don't know they have SIBO or IBS, but they have some of these other things that we can work through. In general, in all of my work, I'm always looking for the root cause or the roots, because that's where I feel we make the most amount of change. I always say that I'm always looking for the first domino to flick in a person's health, because if I pick the last domino, I'm going to get them a little bit of change and they're going to feel a little better. But if I get the middle domino, we might get a little more change that might last longer, but maybe not the whole picture. So my goal is always to try to get to that first domino. Now, I may not be the one that then helps the person get through that route. That's where we bring in other people, but I just want to know that's where we're looking, because that's when we can create holistic shifts. So you'll hear me mention that a few times when I talk about the gut today. I come through all of this honestly. I had suffered with SIBO overgrowth, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, methane dominant, which is now called EMO, intestinal methane overgrowth, which I'm going to tell you about. But that really plagued me for many, many years. And then I had a lot of thyroid dysfunction that basically ended up in a Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroid diagnosis. So over the years of healing my gut, which was a very, big journey. I probably had the worst case of SIBO I've seen. I slowly healed my gut, caused the SIBO to kind of sit back and get better and heal. And then lo and behold, my autoimmune disease has been in remission now for probably 6 years now. I could also be 7. I kind of, to be honest, I stopped counting because I don't really have any of those symptoms. And I only have half my thyroid, but it functions pretty much all well and good on its own. So that's basically how I got into this. There's more to the story, but we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about the gut brain and how that affects you. So let's get going. So there are 3 distinct parts of how the gut and brain are connected. So we have the digestive system, we have the brain, and the nervous system and immune system, and then we have bacteria. And each one of these is playing a role in how our gut and brain communicate. So let's break it down to each one. So the digestive system. The digestive system basically is this long tube from the mouth all the way down to the rectum. Sometimes when we talk about that digestive system, people say, oh, my stomach, or something like that. Well, the stomach is right here. It's this kind of like silly, weird shaped thing. That's only one tiny part of the digestive system. So when we're talking, a lot of the times, I'm going to point to different areas of this as we discuss, but let's just make sure we know that the mouth is right here. This is the esophagus. Can you guys all see my cursor? Yeah. So the esophagus is here, and this is the stomach. Then the stomach comes down and attaches to our small intestine, which is all of these curled up pieces in here. It's 19 to 21 feet long. And then it goes into the large intestine, which basically comes up. This is the ascending colon, the transverse, and the descending colon, then down into the rectum. And then we have also accessory organs of digestion, which we're not going to really talk about tonight, but those include the liver, gallbladder, pancreas, things like that. But I just want you to know they're there and they're acting behind the scenes, but we're not actually going to talk about those tonight. There's just not enough time. But what I want you to understand is in this digestive system, it's a very complex system that we have mechanical things that occur, chemical things that occur, and also electrical signaling. And we'll learn more about that. So in this digestive system, first and foremost, we have the enteric nervous system. And the enteric nervous system basically helps to control the function of the digestive system. So there are about 100 to 500 million. And to be honest, I had to do this big range of numbers because I read about 20 different studies and every one was different. So I was like, okay, we're rounding that to one big amount. So what you need to know is that that enteric nervous system is comprised of millions of nerve cells that line the digestive tract from that esophagus to the rectum. And in those nerve cells is where all the talking is occurring. So nerves are basically part of our communication system. Also, we also have neurons and neurotransmitters that are also part of the communication system. Also in the immune system, we have about 70% of our 70% of our immune system is housed in the gut. So in that complex system, especially lining some in the stomach, but then the small intestine especially, and then in the large intestine, inside the tube of the intestine, we have a very complex mix of different types of cells. And some of those cells house different pieces of the immune system. Right now, in the small intestine, I want you to know that there are very few bacteria that occur in the small intestine. So again, that's this 19 to 21 feet of this like curled around pink tissue right here. That is relatively sterile. As we get closer to where it interacts with the colon, the large intestine, it starts to build in bacterial amounts. This is important later down the road, so just remember that. And also remember that that small intestine has those neurotransmitters, which we will talk more about too. Now, in the large intestine, remember that's this outer, like 3/4 of a square there. That's where the majority of our gut bacteria live. Hundreds and trillions of bacteria live there. And that is significant, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay, so many of us have heard of serotonin and or dopamine and GABA. So these are feel-good hormones. And most of the serotonin, about 80% of the serotonin that is circulated in our bodies is actually made in our gut by those they are neurotransmitters. So they are somewhat created through that complex work that's in there. GABA and dopamine, they're also feel good. You might recognize dopamine by like when we go and exercise for a while, like a nice low grade exercise or even a hardcore exercise. After a certain amount of time, that helps us to release dopamine. Ironically, we also release dopamine when we like pick up our cell phone and look at Instagram and find a happy picture of something that releases dopamine. There are negative things that also release dopamine, like like sugar cravings. Honestly, they also release dopamine. They kind of give the changes in our brain. So, but we know those to be feel good chemicals. Those are created in the gut by neurotransmitters that are also supported by good bacteria. Because the gut bacteria metabolizes those neurotransmitters. So that's an important piece to understand, that the gut bacteria is doing a lot of that work for us. So it's not necessarily like the human body that is metabolizing those things. It's the bacteria that is metabolizing those things. So there's a really interesting, GLP-1, that's what's the common ingredient right now in like Ozempic or Mounjaro, these really kind of very famous drugs that help people to lose weight. Well, basically GLP-1, which is the active ingredient, it's a glucagon-like peptide, but it's a hormone that occurs naturally in the body and helps to regulate blood sugar, digestion, and appetite. So GLP-1 is found in the gut and the brain. So bacteria is helping the glucagon like peptide communicate, and things that we eat or do will help it to be expressed or to be used. But that medication that I mentioned is also kind of like putting it into overdrive. So that's just an example of a neurotransmitter that is kind of in the news right now, in addition to dopamine, GABA, and serotonin. Okay, so in the microbiome, well, first of all, what is a microbiome? So a microbiome is a colony of bacteria. And the cool thing is that each one of us has our very own colony of bacteria. And these colonies, these microbiomes, we actually have them all over our body. Essentially where our body systems meet the outside world. So by the way, also our immune system is in all of these same spots. Okay, so we've got our GI system. So how do we meet the outside world there? Well, by food. We eat food, it goes down the system, and it's interacting with our body. Our reproductive system, that's when we meet the outside world. Our lungs, we're inhaling air from the outside environment. So that's where it connects to a microbiome and also immune system, as well as our skin and the urinary tract, the urinary system. So all of these include epithelial skin cells. So what you need to know is that bacteria live on all these parts of our body, and their main job is to keep us healthy and interact with our immune system, our cardiovascular system, our blood supply, all the pieces and parts. The crazy thing, and I've heard it said so many times, that like this vessel, this body is actually just home to the bacteria. We would not survive if we didn't have them. But what the most amazing thing is that our gut microbiome specifically, as well as these other microbiomes in our reproductive system, lungs, skin, and urinary systems, it's created after we're born, so basically at birth. So a fetus in utero, that is a fully sterile environment. So when a woman is pregnant, that baby is in a fully sterile environment of zero bacteria. When a baby is born, and obviously we were all born, the baby comes through the birth canal or comes out via C-section. If that baby goes through the birth canal, it picks up the first inoculation of bacteria from the mom's vaginal tract. If the baby is born through C-section, they miss out on some of that first inoculation. Now, this is important because oftentimes, like when I'm working with a client, one of the first questions I will ask is, how were you born? Do you know? So the health of the mom is super, is a part of the puzzle here. So if the mom had a very robust and healthy gut bacteria, then she will have a baby that is hopefully born vaginally, and it will then be inoculated with good gut bacteria. Then once that baby is born, everything in its environment will affect that microbiome. But one of the first things that affects it is whether they were breastfed or if they were formula fed. So breastfed produces a ton of bacteria and then inoculates the baby. Every single person that holds the baby, pets in the home, whether they live on a farm or in the city, all of that is going to basically create and help that microbiome, the population of bacteria that will be in that gut. By the time that baby is age 3, that microbiome is mature, and then we spend the rest of our life keeping it healthy. So that part is very significant, okay? So you can imagine, like, if a baby was born to a mom that had a robust microbiome and hit the ground on a farm, and there was a lot of dirt and animals and all this kind of stuff, that baby's going to have a more robust microbiome. Also, let's say that baby traveled a lot internationally at that time between age 0 and 3, they'd be picking up different bits of bacteria all over the world, so they'd have a more robust colony. Conversely, a baby born during this pandemic, the COVID pandemic, where we were using antibacterial, antimicrobial, our circles were really small, so we weren't leaving our homes and kind of being out and about. those babies probably have less of a microbiome robustness, and they might have to work on that more or might have more subsequent health things further down the line. So I think this is always important to note, because in the end, everything that I give you today when I talk about the gut-brain health and tools for you to use is related to keeping our microbiome and our bacteria healthy and robust. Okay. Okay, so let's just move over to the brain and the nervous system. So that was enough for the digestive system for now. Now let's look at the brain and the nervous system. So just as a way so you understand, we have the central nervous system, the CNS. This basically contains the brain and then the spinal cord. So in this picture, that would be, it's kind of tiny, but the yellow is the brain, and then the spinal cord goes down in yellow as well. So we don't have very much control over that. That basically is keeping us alive every second of every moment. And it just does its thing. Unless we get injured, we don't really have control over it. It's going to do its thing from this vantage point. Then we have the autonomic nervous system. So that's the ANS. In here, we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight, flight, and freeze. The parasympathetic, which is the rest, digest, and heal. And then we have the enteric nervous system, which controls the GI tract and all digestion. So if you've worked with me before, you know that I talk about these all the time, okay? Because while the autonomic nervous system is doing a lot of work for us, we do have opportunities to help redirect and make shifts here. Okay, then we also have the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is bidirectional. And so I will be the first to admit that I am not a vagus nerve expert. The vagus nerve is polyvagal theory is such a robust study. And eventually I hope to do that study because it's so kind of amazing. But for our purposes, the vagus nerve basically comes out of the brain, runs down both sides of our spine, and then bifurcates and innervates. So basically gives life and communication to all of the organs in our body, as well as, including our heart, our lungs, the digestive system. I could go on and on. But we also, so the vagus nerve, which is fascinating, is it also is right underneath that lining of the gut. So some of the nerves that are on the inside of the tube of the gut, they include communication into that vagus nerve, which then goes right up and travels and talks to the brain. So that's like the direct walkie-talkie right there. Now, also, if you've worked with me, especially in the last couple of years, we know that we have a lot that we can do to support our own vagus nerve. And I will give you just a few tips on that later in this webinar. But what I want you to know here especially is that we can influence our autonomic nervous system through these pieces, the vagus nerve, and then also the immune system. So the immune system is located throughout the body. We've talked about this before. It's in the GI tract, it's in the lungs, it's in our blood supply, it's everywhere, because its job is to determine that friend or foe and to keep us safe. The immune system includes lots of cells, and one of them is cytokines, and those are signaling molecules. So you might have remembered cytokines was like all in the news around the COVID pandemic because it's just communication. So again, immune system is communicating through those cells to this whole process, okay? Okay, so in addition to the central nervous system and everything that we just talked about, we also have what's called the HPA axis. And this is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It lives in the brain. So what does this all mean? Basically, this is the communication that occurs when we're under stress or no stress. So the hypothalamus and the pituitary are in the brain, and they do all the communication like the conductors of the hormonal system. Okay, so they turn on and turn off depending on what hormone is doing what. A very common hormone that you will be familiar with is cortisol or adrenaline. Those are hormones, and they are excreted by the adrenal glands, which are not in your brain. They are actually down above your kidneys. What you need to know about hormones is that they all are chit-chatting, and when one is loud, other ones are going to be more quiet. So if cortisol from your sympathetic nervous system stress response is high, it's going to start to turn off or quiet some of those other hormones. So what other hormones are there? Insulin, that helps us process glucose. Even estrogen or testosterone, those are hormones. Ghrelin, that controls whether we're hungry or not, that's a hormone. So remember, because stress is going to be some of the things I talk about here about a tool that you have. Attending to your stress and mitigating stress helps the adrenal glands release less stress hormones that then allows the other hormones like insulin, which we need, to help it run better to improve digestion. Okay, I feel like I'm getting so heady. And again, remember, like, you're not going to have to remember all of this, but I'm starting like big picture information and then tools. So the limbic brain is at the base of our brainstem. That also controls how we respond to stimuli. It triggers us to eat and drink. Basically, it's responsible for keeping us safe. Again, I talk a lot about the limbic brain in my work because it's a super important part of this whole process. And we do have an opportunity to affect the limbic brain for our benefit. Okay, and then also in that central nervous system, remember there's that neurotransmitters and neurons again. So obviously I probably said those two words about 10 times already. So we must know that that's a big communication route. All of these components that we have just talked about, from the brain, the nervous system, and the gut, they all affect our mood, mental cognition, and mental health. They even work with and express it through cravings, and even help us express, turn on or turn off genes. Super important. Okay. Oh my gosh, back to the bacteria. So those 100 trillions of bacteria that live in this large intestine, so it's just a different design, but now that's the large intestine right here. These bacteria affect gene expression. Like I just said, they ferment the foods that we eat. They digest foods. They signal, communicate, excrete enzyme, help hormones to turn on and off. So bacteria, they're super important. They also produce something called short chain fatty acids, and these are super essential for our brain and mental health. Short chain fatty acids cross the blood-brain barrier. So we haven't talked about the blood-brain barrier yet, but the blood-brain barrier, say that 12 times fast, is a selective barrier around our brain that keeps things out like infection. Getting a brain infection is usually fatal, right? So the blood-brain barrier is going to basically say, none of you things can go out. So not many things are allowed to go through that barrier. But these short chain fatty acids that are produced when bacteria eat food, they go through that blood-brain barrier and are essential for mood, mental cognition, even hormone excretion and balance. So there's a lot there. These bacteria also activate the vagus nerve, regulate stress and mood, determine which foods you like and dislike, and they are the gatekeepers of the gut. They really work hard for us. Now, fun fact, 60% of our poop is live or dead bacteria. Only 40% is food that we've eaten. The rest is bacteria that we're pooping out, or things are dying off and shifting or changing. That's a lot of what our poop is made of. Okay, so we just talked a lot about the neurotransmitters, how they line the gut. what the bacteria is doing. We talked about the hormones, the nervous system. So there's that bi-directional communication between things happening in the brain and things happening in the gut. So changes in the microbiome, dysbiosis, and I'm going to go through all these terms here next slide, but dysbiosis, I'll tell you what that is, gut irritation, leaky gut, they will all affect what's going on in the brain. On the other side, we have anxiety, depression, mood changes, being stuck in that sympathetic stress system, leaky brain. That's where that BBB, the blood-brain barrier, gets less selective. All of those things in turn will affect the way the gut is functioning. Okay, so it's all like today I was stuck in my stress system. I got a little indigestion and I got a little bloating and like upset stomach. So that's an exact, right? Stress, turned away, supported, and did something to my gut. So that's part of that communication. Okay, let's just know these terms. So inflammation can be acute or chronic. Inflammation that's acute is super necessary. If we get a splinter in our toe and the body sends out all these cells, turns red, it gets pussy and gets swollen, then we get that splinter out, all of that inflammation goes away and we're good. Chronic inflammation, on the other hand, is when something is kind of like low grade, irritating the body and the system, and it kind of just like festers over and over and over, and it creates water in cells and things not to work as well. It's chronic inflammation that we want to work through. Indeed, most diseases that are lifestyle diseases are caused by this chronic inflammation over years. Dysbiosis is a condition basically when the gut microbiome is out of balance. So when either non-commensal, so not helpful bacteria shows up or other things, it's when things get out of balance. Gut irritation would just be when the lining of the gut is inflamed. All those cells, they just kind of get pissed off. Leaky gut is hyperpermeability of the gut lining. So in the lining of the gut, on the inside of the tube, basically we have all of these defensive mechanisms, all these cells that line up that decide what can go through this permeable lining into the bloodstream. When it becomes hyperpermeable, it can't be as selective as what goes through to the bloodstream. So something like a large protein or a bacteria that the body couldn't clean out before then, that's when things start to get a little messy. Leaky gut almost always leads to a lot of brain symptoms like mood issues, sometimes anxiety, even some depression, as well as brain fog and things like that. Leaky brain is when that blood-brain barrier also loses some of its selective permeability. We definitely don't want leaky brain. That's not fun and not good. IBS is irritable bowel syndrome. It's a disorder. It's not necessarily a disease in and of itself. It's some people would call it a trash can term. It's like we got all these things, but we really can't figure out why, so let's call it IBS. IBD is irritable bowel disease. Things like Crohn's and colitis would fit in this bucket. And then there's SIBO and EMO. So SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That's when bacteria shows up in what is supposed to be mostly sterile, the small intestine. And then intestinal methane growth is when methane, archaea that make methane, show up in the small intestine or the large intestine, and it shouldn't be there either. So there's just some terms for you. So these kind of things like constipation, diarrhea, food sensitivities are usually a sign that there's some kind of leaky gut going on. IBS, certain diets, SIBO and EMO, gut dysbiosis, and even food poisoning can affect the brain because every single one of them is changing the immune cells and the bacterial cells that line the gut. So they can affect all of these other things. On the flip side, anxiety, depression, autism spectrum disorders, TBIs and brain injuries, Alzheimer's disease, leaky brain, and also the diseases of Parkinson's and multiple sclerosis, all of those actually also affect the gut through the nerves, also through gene expression, and just the functioning of the neurons. And what's interesting is autism spectrum disorders, especially, they know that people with autism, depending on the severity of their symptoms, they have certain types of bacteria and dysbiosis that isn't found in like a neurotypical individual. So this really, when you look at this, it tells us like the number one thing that flows through all of these themes is that gut bacteria and stress are two of the biggest tools that we have to work with to improve both our gut and our brain. Okay, so let's talk about how to make the gut bacteria happy. I think this little guy, this little logo should be my mascot because he just makes me so happy when I see that dude. I know that's just weird, but he's like happy and all excited. So first of all, I want you all to remember, because like we talked about, everybody creates that gut microbiome by the age of 3. We are all unique, every single one of us, and everything is connected. I'm going to give you broad brush ideas, and each of you will have to figure out what works best for your body and brain, right? I can help you if you need help, but basically what I'm going to say, it's your job to then test it and figure it out for your own self and your own body. Notwithstanding, not only do we have that unique bacteria that's only unique to us, but we also have unique lives. So our emotional systems, our experiences, our memories, the type of work that we do, the type of relationships that we have, where in the world we live, all of that contributes to who we are in this body today. So when we work with the gut-brain connection, we have to take that into account, because we're not just like, our gut bacteria isn't just living in some petri dish in a lab. Our lab is our life, and we have to take that into account. So I'm not going to talk about all of these things today because that's far beyond the scope that I can fit into an hour, but all of these things will affect our gut bacteria, our diet, our stress, how we mitigate it, how it shows up in our life, our sleep, how we breathe, probiotics, mindset. So mindset meaning like how we think about things and kind of set ourselves up for success. And then mindfulness. So our ability to be present in the moment and attend to our own feelings and awareness. All of these, and exercise. I didn't put it in there, but yes, exercise too, and movement. All of these have the ability to give to our bodies and our bacteria or take away from the functioning of that gut-brain connection. Okay, so what are you going to eat? So first of all, now I have an asterisk on each one of these because I want you to know that if you have IBS, IBD, SIBO, or any of this, some of these, adding these things in your diet gets tricky, because while we want to feed good bacteria, these things also will feed bad or non-helpful, non-commensal bacteria. So if you're going to add any of these things in, do it slowly. Check and see how you do. So one of them is fiber. Fiber is essential to feed the bacteria in the colon. Polyphenols act as prebiotics and are anti-inflammatory. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about each one of these. And then we have fermented foods. They help to inoculate the gut and feed bacteria all at the same time. By the way, 75% of people with IBS actually have SIBO, and SIBO can be treatable. So fiber, like I said, it feeds the bacteria in the colon. Fiber is found in natural whole foods, vegetables, fruits, whole grains. We have soluble fiber, which dissolves in water. That's really helpful to the gut. That's in things like beans, broccoli, carrots, sweet potatoes, stone fruits. And then insoluble fiber, that absorbs water and it adds bulk to stools, things like nuts, beans, and vegetables. You'll notice like beans have both soluble and insoluble fiber. So then we have polyphenols. If there's only one thing that you take away from today's conversation or tonight's conversation, just one thing, it's this. Eat a rainbow, a variety of colorful foods in your diet that come from whole foods. If that's the only thing you do that. Basically, you have a rainbow of foods that makes the gut bugs happy, and then you're happy. That's what you need to know. Things like berries, carrots, peppers, red cabbage, spinach, turmeric, ginger. Those are all vibrant colors. They're rich in antioxidants and are anti-inflammatory. Sorry, my dog might bark here in a second. Okay, so that's important. Remember this, eat the rainbow. It's the best advice I can possibly give you today. Variety and rainbow of whole foods. Hey, quiet. Sorry. So then there's fermented foods. Lacto-fermented foods is best. These will be perishable. You will not find these on the regular shelves at your grocery store. These will only be in the refrigerator. They are usually done with a salty brine, and a salty brine brings out the natural bacteria and feeds the natural bacteria of the foods. Fermented foods both re-inoculate the bacteria that you have, but they also create an environment for the existing bacteria to be happy. Things like Wild Brine, that's a company, a brand, pickles and kimchis, sauerkraut. I love the brand Cocoyo yogurt, but that's only 1 tablespoon at a time, not eating the whole thing at once. Same with coconut water, kefir, regular dairy kefir and yogurt if you do okay with dairy. But the key here, just like fiber and polyphenol-rich foods, introduce them slowly if your gut bacteria is not accustomed to that. Okay, I know I'm like creeping up on my time limit here, so I want to make sure I get to some questions for you guys. But the types of diets that I often see are intermittent fasting, carnivore, keto, low FODMAP, paleo. So if you feel better on these ways of eating, that might be a sign that you've got bacteria in the wrong place, like in the small intestine, or bacteria that is not beneficial to you. Every single one of these starves good bacteria in the long run. None of them, except for maybe paleo, and we can talk about intermittent fasting as a whole different kind of webinar, but all of these basically are not meant to be done forever. Like I would say 3 months, because if you start to do these types of diets that are very low in fiber or have no fiber, like a true carnivore diet, then you are starving that good bacteria, and then eventually you will have a decrease in short chain fatty acids. I am the poster child for that. I always guinea pig myself, so I can let you know that I was on a low FODMAP diet for many years, way before I went to school and learned all of this stuff. And it took me a very long time to rebuild my gut bacteria. So I had to learn it the hard way. And to be honest, I really don't want you guys to go through the same thing that I did. So remember that if you feel better, you might be starving your not great bacteria or wrong location bacteria, but you're also starving your good bacteria. Okay. Oh my gosh, what about probiotics? I ran through this thing and I was like, oh my God, I didn't tell them about probiotics. And I know you guys are going to ask me about that. So probiotics are supplements that you can take that have biome, like that have bacteria in them. Really, it depends on whether or not you should do probiotics. It depends a lot on what your situation is. The reason why I recommend fermented foods is they have natural probiotics and are a lot easier for your body to assimilate. I do like to use targeted probiotics on a case-by-case basis, but how we tolerate them and what we use is really unique to our situation. Not everybody needs them. So if you're gonna try probiotics, go slow. And remember that fermented foods are probiotic rich. So that's often a really great place to start. Okay. We are coming to the end. So thank you everybody for being here with me tonight. I'm just going to share this last slide or two more slides and then we'll move on. I want to let you know that I'm doing the first ever Gut Essentials 4-week mini course, and I'm starting that on September 23rd. I've designed that specifically for people that are experiencing food sensitivities, trouble in your digestion, IBS or SIBO, or you're just confused about all the gut information out there. My intent is that I've been full for a while now and I can't see everybody that comes my way. So in this mini course, I'm creating an opportunity for people who really want to just get started on their gut health and get those essentials. So if you are interested in this, you'll get an email probably tomorrow with the link. We can also put the link in a chat in the minute. But I have early bird pricing until Sunday, the midnight, the August 31st. And also I do have scholarship opportunities. So if you are interested, you are more than welcome to apply for that. All of that is on the page for all that information. I'd love to have you there. Okay, so stay connected. You'll be part of my newsletter if you want. You can unsubscribe if you want after this, but you'll miss out on tips and news and events. So stay connected. I hate too much email, so I don't send out too much email. I try to only send essential stuff. You can also join me on Instagram at Karen Mitchell Wellness. Of course, you can join my new 4-week mini course on the gut essentials. And also I give everybody a free conversation. So if you're like, Karen, I don't even know how to apply this to me, or I've got this issue, can we talk about it? Or you even want to know if that 4-week course is for you. We'll also put this, a link so that you can schedule with me in the chat. I'm also at Enso Natural Medicine here in Bozeman, so you're welcome to reach out to me there. So I'm going to stop the share and let's get some of your questions answered. So again, thank you guys so much for being here. Let's open up that chat. What do we think, Alicia? Do I have, okay, I got all these questions. Okay, let me go down and see. Do we have one regular one that seems to be showing up a lot?
We had a question just about brain fog.
Yep.
And how this relates to that. And we had another question about the carnivore diet.
Okay.
In reference to it. And then there was, I think the most recent one was about a C-section.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. Okay, great. So let's just talk about the carnivore diet. So so none of these things are bad. Thanks for asking, Blaine. None of these are bad, except for the fact that carnivore diet in the long term is not beneficial to your bacteria. Also, it can be hard on the liver and digestion. So really, variety is the spice of life, but most people are doing the carnivore diet because they feel better on it, because they're removing fibers and maybe they'll lose more weight that way and other things. So usually we want to look at the underlying piece of why a person is doing better on a carnivore diet so we can make some altercations there to the gut microbiome or even to the liver to make sure it's functioning appropriately. And then you can eat times where you have more meat than others, but then hopefully that allows you to have more variety. I mean, I call myself a carnivorous plant eater. So I eat a lot of plants and a lot of meats. So that's what works best for me. So the other question about the C-section piece, like how can you give your baby the microbiome if you haven't had a vaginal delivery? Well, there's a lot of studies now that actually says that a baby born through C-section, if that physician who's delivering the baby can actually swab the vaginal microbiome and then rub it on the baby, that's a great place to start. Also breastfeeding, and then the mom can take probiotics, and then also they will pass those probiotics and their good gut bacteria to the baby. So that's 2 ways. And then I would, especially after between year 1 and 3, I would just let that baby be in the environment as much as possible. So that's a big answer to that. I think I just missed one. What was the other one? Those were 2. Is there something else I just missed there?
There was a question about brain fog in general. Just wanted to know how to have less of it.
Okay, great. So brain fog in general, a lot of people with IBS and or SIBO and EMO or even Crohn's or colitis have brain fog. So one way to work through brain fog is to support and shift the microbiome and be sure that there isn't anything in the gut that is, non-beneficial. And then also, brain fog can also be part of the hormones. So depending on a person, whether they're male or female, their hormones, including stress hormones, will impact brain fog. So when we work with that, we kind of take some time to figure out exactly what's going on there, and then we can make changes in diet and lifestyle to kind of alleviate that brain fog. So I guess the answer is it's a process, and it really is unique to each person. Okay, so I can see that Susan has a question about, can SIBO be cured by doing protocols or just managed? If it can be only managed, how does one ever go off a low FODMAP diet? I asked because you said not healthy to be low FODMAP for long term. Yes, great question, Susan. And so SIBO, there is a lot of differing information about whether SIBO can be fully cured. Most of the time, there are some people, about almost, I don't know, it could be a third to a half. That number is fluctuating in current research. A third to a half can work through SIBO and let that be fully in their rear view mirror and never see it again. The other half are going to have SIBO maybe recur or be something that you kind of have to like pick off as you go. But the answer is not to fully be on a very strict low FODMAP diet, even if you do have SIBO that's flowing. So that's where the dance kind of shows up of how do we feed the good bacteria, but also starve the bacteria that we don't want. That is more like a nuanced thing. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. The other thing is, curious if our microbiome is fully developed at age 3 and we develop our IBS or other gut complications. Did we do something to cause this, and is there a way to restore it back to best health? That is a fantastic question, Mike and Lynn. I love that. Yes and yes. No, I'm just going to remove, like, we didn't necessarily do it. There are situations and things that occur in our lives, like antibiotic use, lots and lots of stress, surgeries, changes in adhesions within our things, endometriosis, food poisoning, amoebic dysentery, things like that, even Lyme's disease. These different things will affect the way that the gut microbiome is functioning. And the thing is that we have every chance to course correct. So for instance, let's say you end up on antibiotics because you have strep throat and you do a 5-day Z-Pak. Your best option after that is to spend the next month repairing. So that might be taking beneficial probiotics. It might be eating certain foods. It might be attending to your stress to help your nervous system adjust and take the time it can to heal. I fully believe that every single person has the ability to heal as best as we can and to achieve improved health from where you are now. It's just a matter of like figuring out what that is. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. Let me just make sure. So yes, we can do something about it. We just need to, help it along. Yes, and when I say that we make it all our whole microbiome by age 3 and then we spend the rest of our life taking care of it, that kind of falls into that idea, okay? So the older we are, the more life we've had, the more effects on our microbiome we've had, the more work we might have to do. Okay, hold on, I see another message in here. Let me read this. So full-fat Greek yogurt does have probiotics in it, and it can be helpful. Whether or not you should have more than that kind of just depends. A full-fat Greek yogurt is a great place to start. Not all commercial yogurts have the amount of bacteria that maybe we would want in it, because traditionally fermented foods had like a certain length of time that they were fermented in order to get that bacterial colony to really be in there. So current day commercial yogurts are usually fermented way too short, and then they make up for that by adding thickeners or sugars. So any chance you have to like have a well fermented yogurt, like if we were to look like Bulgarian White Mountain yogurt, for instance, is longer fermented, so it has more bacteria. The reason why I recommend coconut yogurt is because that stuff is so alive that if you open it and close it and don't come back for 4 or 5 days, the top will almost pop off with bacterial fermentation gas, right? So we know that's a live food. So the question is, yes, you can do full fat Greek yogurt for probiotics, but it may or may not be enough for you. We would only know depending on what works for your system. Okay, a question up here. Let me see, what's that? Can you guys, oh, do you still benefit from eating whole foods that are cooked, baked, fried? Cheyenne, I'm not entirely sure, but yes. So if I were to choose those types of preparing whole foods that are best for your microbiome, raw would actually be best to inoculate your microbiome because it has a lot of enzymes in it, but not everybody can handle raw foods. So I like to say a combination of cooked and raw foods is always great. I prefer it to be baked, sauteed, and roasted are usually the best options that preserve both the flavor and the nutrient profiles. We don't want to boil vegetables and things like that because a lot of the nutrients leach into the water and then become unavailable to our systems. And fried has a whole host of other issues related to that because of the different fats that are used, and whether it's breaded or not. So yeah, my go-to that I always recommend are raw, sauteed, roasted, and I missed one in there, but yes, there you go. All right. Okay, how are we doing on questions? We have just another time for maybe one more. If anybody, does anybody want to ask your question live or anything that I haven't answered? No? Okay, awesome. Well, that means we're about to have an online, oh, is steaming okay? Yes, steaming's great. And you will notice that steaming will still put, Blaine, you always do that, but you will notice that steaming does leach some of the nutrients into the water. And Blaine is saying, you know, McDonald's is bad. Yes, it is bad, so stop eating it. Awesome, you guys. Well, I so appreciate your time, and just know that this recording is going out to a lot of people. So I'm excited to spread the information. Don't be a stranger, stay connected, and thank you so much for being here tonight. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you. Thanks to the Zoom Angels. Okay. All right. Thanks, Alicia and Keisha. I'm going to sign off too. And I'm going to
You
go.
were fantastic, Karen. Just wanted to let you know.
Thanks, Vicky. You're awesome. So glad you were here.
Yes, love to all.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks so much. Okay. You're awesome. Thanks, Alicia. We'll be in touch.